Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. I hope you are all doing really, really well. I wanted to say I'm sorry about last night. I had some technical issues last night. I did not have access to the internet, which then meant I couldn't stream. So we're live today, a little bit outside of our regular schedule, but we are here today. I wanted to do something a little bit different today in that I want to show you what I do sometimes with just drawing lines. And given that we had talked a lot about neurographic lines before, I wanted to do a little quick review on what they are and answer some of the questions you guys had, and maybe move on to a little bit more of an advanced practice and showing you guys how to do double lines and triple lines and how to introduce the frequency in terms of color with just drawing lines and what happens when we use multiple colors in order to create our original composition to begin with. Okay, so if you guys have any questions, please put them in the chat for me. I will do my best to answer them. I would like for this session to be as interactive as possible. But for today, we are not going to be doing anything else other than playing with some lines. And I hope that this information can help you guys a little bit more. Okay? So if you're ready, today I'm going to be using number one, colors to draw my lines to begin with. And I'm also going to be using a much more finer tipped point because I want to show you the difference between when we use a fine tipped point as a pen or an ultra fine tipped pen as opposed to using the thicker markers that we've been using right now. Up until this point. The thicker your marker is, the easier it is to round, right? The less likely it is that you're going to create lips in your lines as you round your lines. When you use very fine tipped equipment, then we need to be a little bit more accurate in terms of the way that we do our work as well. Good? Everybody ready? Let me switch my view so you can see my paper. My face is no longer going to be any use to you, so here we go. Okay, so first of all, let's do a quick review of what it means when we draw neurographic lines. Let me grab my thicker point. Okay, so as you guys know, a neurographic line is a counterintuitive line that goes where it is not expected and does not repeat itself. Okay? So what we are looking for when we are drawing neurographic lines is this tension that we feel internally, right? So you really want to feel for where this line wants to go and go anywhere but there. Now, when we are at the beginning of drawing these lines, some of the things that tend to happen is things like as we start to draw this line, we do jagged things, and sometimes at the very beginning, we can do things like this. So your line can actually not end up looking very smooth, right? Because you're stopping and pausing and waiting to see where you want to go and you go anywhere else. This is okay. At the beginning, this is okay. Don't get afraid. Don't think that you're doing anything wrong. Eventually, as you move along and you do this more and more, you start to trust yourself and your pen a little bit more, so you'll allow it to move as you try to figure out and decide where this thing wants to go next. And even when you change directions quickly, it doesn't become these jagged points. If you're creating these jagged points, it's okay. For now, it's okay. Keep going with it. Because the same thing that you're going to do is when you get to these points, later on, you're going to round them and they're not going to seem so jagged anymore. Okay? So it's okay. Don't get into perfectionism. Don't stop yourself if your lines are not looking very smooth in the beginning and they're looking a little bit more jagged or edgy. That's okay. Okay? That resistance is okay. Feeling that is okay. Eventually, with practice, You will learn to flow as this is happening. Okay? The second question I'm asked a lot is about loops. Okay? So if we are drawing a neurographic line, and it's supposed to go where you don't expect it, so sometimes we'll create loops. That's okay. The only thing that we're going to do later on is then dissolve this loop and use the curvature of that loop to create new lines that are going to give you exit points and entry points into that loop. We don't want to leave the loops as loops. But if you create loops, it's okay. If you're going backwards, it's okay. Okay? So don't get too bogged down at the very beginning about the smoothness and the quality of your line. What is more important than anything is you feeling this resistance, is you feeling where your pen wants to go and going anywhere but there. Okay, I'm doing this really quickly right now because I have a lot of practice, but you don't have to go that fast. Now, the other question that I was asked is, what about using your non-dominant hand to draw neurographic lines? You can. You can use your non-dominant hand in order to feel what it feels like to surrender to your hand, to what your body wants to do. Eventually, you want to bring it into your dominant hand, but if you want to feel what it's like to give up control, because we usually have less control in our non-dominant hand than we do with our dominant hand. It's okay to try using your non-dominant hand. It's also okay at the beginning to use a round object to chase around your page. That's also okay. But these are at the very beginning for you to feel what it feels like to surrender to this process. You don't want to become dependent on these crutches. You want to get to the point where you are intentionally creating these lines that gives you this tension of where you want to go or where it wants to go versus where you take it. Because what we're trying to create here is a pattern disrupt. Okay, we want to create a pattern interruption. Your mind, your subconscious mind and your conscious mind and your brain is used to using certain patterns. This is why a lot of us, when we doodle, we do things like this. Okay, because we're used to these kinds of patterns. We are used to waves. Okay, but this is a pattern that's already established. We want to break these kinds of patterns. So you really want to feel that tension. So don't be in a rush when it comes to drawing neurographic lines. Do it as slowly as you need to really feel where that line wants to go and take it anywhere but there. Okay? That's the most important thing. Don't be in a rush. 1, don't be in a rush. 2, don't be a perfectionist. The idea of this work is never about perfection. And you will go through times when creating neurographic art where you feel like, okay, I don't like what I'm doing. This isn't perfect. Stick with it. Don't start over. I can't tell you how many times I will start something and I will look at it and I'll go, I don't like this. This isn't pretty. But I will keep doing what I'm doing. I will keep going through it. I will round them. I will do all of that. Okay? So what do you do when there are clusters of many lines crossing each other that form a star shape? That becomes like that, like this area when it looks like a star shape. We round all of these. You actually want these. because once you round them, they actually really end up looking like the connections between your neurons, like the nexuses inside your body. This isn't the best paper. My pen bleeds on this, which is why I'm going to use a different pen. But it's okay. The more connections you have in a spot, it means there's more energy coming through that. I usually use these areas to then draw other lines if I feel like I need them in my composition. Does that make sense? So it's okay. It's okay to have clusters, because eventually we're going to round all of those intersections. Does that help, Claudia? Beautiful. So, now that we've gone through the basics, this is what a basic neurographic line looks like. What I want to talk to you guys today is just playing with lines and not necessarily having to create any composition other than playing with lines. I do this all the time. Okay, this is one example. This is me just drawing lines. Okay, so let me show you a couple more examples, or like things like this. Okay, you can create this flow of energy. You can use this kind of thing. You can use this kind of expression to just think through something without having to put in any other form of geometry, if that makes sense. Okay, so what I want to do is, we haven't discussed a couple of things. One is, we haven't discussed how to do these kinds of lines, because this is a much finer tipped point. This is a different kind of process of doing lines. And also, what happens when we use multiple colors in drawing lines? What happens when we do that? What happens to the rounding? Short answer is, you'll end up doing rounding in more than one session. So with every single color, we're going to round. So if I were to show you all of these intersections, you'll see I have rounded all the colors in and mixed them in together. Okay, so if you look at this intersection, there's multiple rounds of rounding that have happened. Okay, so this takes a different amount of patience. So I want to take you through this, because sometimes what you want to do is, you want to introduce the color from the very beginning of your composition. You want the color to be in the lines, so that the lines aren't just your flow of energy, but also they have their own frequency. Okay, so let's do this. Let's play with some lines today. Okay, so if you have different colored markers, choose a few different colors that you want to use for today. I'm gonna use a few different colors. Let's see. Okay, let's start with this and see where we go. Okay, so choose a few different colors that you want the frequency of. Mostly choose what you find pretty. Okay, that's what's going to help you the most. I don't know why my camera is so out of focus. Let me see if I fix that. Okay, I don't know why it's fuzzy on this end of the paper, but anyway, I hope it's okay. So when we want to do this, let's first talk about drawing double lines. So when you are drawing stranded lines or double or triple lines, we do this sometimes when we want to have either more definition in our work, or sometimes we do this when we want a certain line to stand out. So for example, when I do a tree of life, sometimes smack dab in the center of that, I'll create a chord, because, or when we are doing a timeline release, you want that timeline to stand out. So you will turn that line into a chord, and you can leave other lines as being standalone. So there's a definition when you want to give definition to certain things. Or also when I'm neurographing my neurographic shapes, same kind of idea. I'm going to chord them. Okay. So, oops. Okay. So when we want to draw these kinds of lines, the first thing we do is draw the lines as we usually would. So I'm going to start somewhere on the page, and I'm just going to start drawing my first line. Now, once I have this line, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over it. Again, remember that a neurographic line never repeats itself. So I'm going to do this line again, but I'm not going to repeat it exactly as it was. I'm going to have it follow the same pattern or the same path, but not exactly the same way. So even in the second line that I'm drawing, I'm following the first, but I'm still allowing it to go where it is not expected. Okay, what I'm not doing is zigzagging and going over and under, over and under, over and under, over and under, over and under. This is not what we want to create. Okay, so as you're going through this, this is the same process still. This line is following a specific path, but it is still going where you don't expect it. If we do the over under, right? If you wave through this, you're going to create patterns again. It is a little bit less intelligible because of how many lines you have, and once you start rounding them together, they're not seen as much, but your subconscious mind is going to remember. Okay? So as we draw these neurographic lines, I'm still feeling where it wants to go, but I'm resisting the urge. And sometimes you'll forget where one line goes, and you'll start kind of chasing another line, and that's okay. Okay, so I look like I have little loops here. So because I don't want to have loops, I'm going to take that line and create other lines from there so that I can create entry and exit into these lines for energy. Okay, so draw a couple of lines with one of your colors, and then we're going to introduce a second color. We're going to repeat this process. We're going to draw our lines first, and then we're going to start the process of rounding. So you see, I'm going in the general direction, but I'm not following it exactly. This is really bothering me that my lens is not focused. I'm just going to try to see. Okay, that's a little better now. Okay. Okay? Now, one of the things that will end up happening when you do this kind of work, especially with the ultra fine tipped pen, is that your lines can look thinner or disjointed sometimes. That's okay, because we're going to go over them. We're going to go over all of it and round all of it together, and essentially we're going to go over all of these lines all over again, and that will thicken them up and that will give them a little bit more texture. Okay, so just for posterity's sake, I'm actually going to use, like, I was going to use more colors, but we'll see how much time we're going to have. I don't want to keep you guys here forever. So I'm following the general path, but not exactly the same line. Okay, you see this? You see these sections? I kind of, from muscle memory, remember where my line is going, but it doesn't have to follow the exact same path. In fact, I want it not to follow the exact same path. And again, every time I'm drawing a neurographic line, I'm looking for that tension. The tension in my body that says, oh, you're not doing as I want. You're not repeating the patterns that I'm comfortable with. That tension is what heals us. So that's really, really important. That tension is what creates the pattern interrupt. Okay? Now, once we have a few of these lines, what I do is I have the different colors always handy, because this is what's going to happen. I'm going to start rounding with one color, and I'll show you what happens when we get into an intersection with another color. Okay? So let's start with our purple, which was our first color. And exactly the same way as I've been doing always, I'm going to go over this geometry. Whatever shape these intersections are making, I'm going to go over the whole thing. Okay, let me bring my paper here so you can see over my hand. So I follow the whole shape all the way around, and I'm rounding the whole thing. This is why I said if your lines are faint in the beginning, it's okay. It doesn't matter, even if they're disconnected or disjointed because you're doing them too fast. Okay? Okay, so here I'm meeting with the next color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to round with the other color, and now I'm going to create a connection between these two. Okay, and I'm going to do it with both colors, so they bleed into each other. This is my little purple area. This part is my green area. And I'm going to blend the green into the purple and the purple into the green. The idea for this is you want to interconnect these lines together, because if we don't do that, what is going to happen is this, the same thing that we used to do with universal consciousness lines. If I have a line, if I have these lines here like this, they look like they're connected with each other, yeah? but in reality there is a gap between them. So I want to make sure that these lines are all connected with each other, which is why we're going to blend them into each other. So if I bring this closer so you guys can see, I'm blending both colors into each other. Okay, so when I have this green in the middle of this purple, I'm going to round this purple by itself. So this shape gets rounded here. This gets rounded. So I will maintain the integrity of the shape itself. But then when I have the green meeting up with it, this is where I round. Let me bring it closer so you guys can see. So I round the green with the purple. I bleed it into it. Did you see? I didn't create another purple area here. I'm going with the flow of where this purple is, and with the green, I'm blending the green into the purple. Okay, this becomes really tedious work, and it goes very slow. Okay. So this is why I'm saying you're going to end up with multiple rounds of rounding. For each color, we're rounding it with itself and with the colors that it intersects with. Is that clear? Does that make sense? If you're following along with me, give me a thumbs up or something in the chat so I know I haven't lost you. And after that, I'm just going to give us quiet time so we work on our lines and on rounding. But if you have any questions, I'm looking at the chat. Okay, you can put them in and I will do my best to answer them. Sometimes this is all the composition I need. I also use these double and triple lines in programming a lot, in the programming compositions. Thank you, Claudia. Okay, but sometimes these stranded lines is all I need. If I'm really thinking about something and trying to process it, and I don't necessarily have an intention, but I'm just processing certain thoughts, I like to do these kinds of lines. Okay, so it allows me to be present. It allows me to give flow to my work and to my thoughts. But at the same time, I'm not setting an intention. I'm practicing being unattached. Okay, I'm trying to release any expectations that I have about how things are going to go. So try this, have fun with it. And for now, all we're going to do is listen to this beautiful music, round these together, and if you have any questions, let me know. So when you have, let me try to find something that looks like what you're talking about. Anytime two lines intersect, I'm going to blend those intersections together. So as much as possible, I do not want sharp angles. So for example, when I have an intersection between the yellow and the green, okay, I'm going to leave the integrity of this shape in the green together. Okay. What I'm going to do, what is the question? See this? I'm going to round this yellow with it. So I won't leave that square that looked like a square in there. I come in and round it with the other color. Was that the question, Claudia, or did I not understand your question properly? The simple answer to your question is anytime you see anything square, we round it. Now, as to what color you round that with and how you round that with, I will leave that to your personal judgment and to your artistic. Right, yeah. If you have a jagged end to your line, then in order for you to round it, that crooked corner needs to have another line coming out of it. Right? So if I have a really sharp edge somewhere, I will use that sharp edge to draw a new line, and then I will round that intersection. Okay? So let me flip this over so you understand. So let's say I have done something and I have a corner like this or a jagged corner like that. I can't necessarily round this with itself. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this point as a starting point for another line. Then I'm going to round that intersection. That's exactly what we do in releases, remember? When we do a release and we have like, that's my release, and I have these sharp edges, I can't round that sharp edge. There's nothing for me to round it with. So what I will do is I will dissolve it. And now I have an intersection, and that intersection I can round. Good? Beautiful. Okay. When you do this kind of work, when you work with ultrafine tipped pens, you need to bring your patience. You really, really need to have your patience because this is not going to happen quick. If you want to do something quick, then you want to use a thicker tipped pen. Because when you draw these lines with a thicker tipped pen, let me just go to a new page. If I do the exact same process, but I'm using a thicker tipped pen, you see the quality of the intersections already? They look a little bit rounded already. Okay, so if I want to round it, all I'm doing sometimes is just putting a dot at the end. And that just rounded the whole intersection. So if I want the work to go fast, then I'm using a thicker tip. If I'm using an ultra fine tip point, now this is going to be a new composition I have to finish because I drew lines and I need to do something with it. So if I'm using a really, really fine tipped pen, that means I'm dedicating a lot of time to what I'm doing. Okay, now this is bleeding through from underneath. So ignore the lines underneath that we just drew. But when you, the thinner your marker, the more precise your work is, the longer it is going to take for you to finish. And you are going to experience more resistance. Okay? Let me see if I can get rid of, there we go. I can get rid of the shadows that are on my page. Okay? When we do things with a very, very fine-tipped pen, you will have these feelings of, oh my God, this is taking forever. Oh my God, this is a lot of work. This is called resistance to rounding. This is your ego stepping in and saying, I don't know what exactly is happening here, and I don't know that I like it. And so when we experience this resistance, this is where we need to stick with it. Neurographic art is kind of like yoga. In yoga, they say when you feel like you want to get out of the pose, that's the time to hold the pose. Same thing here. If you're experiencing resistance to rounding, that is the time you need to sit through it and actually round even more. Okay? Now, if you start something and you can't round it in one sitting, then give yourself specific time period. I'm going to do this for half an hour. I'm going to do this for an hour. I'm going to do this for 10 minutes, whatever. But put a timer, and until that timer is up, don't get up. Don't stop what you're doing. If we do that, we're creating procrastination. We're programming procrastination into our system. And I don't know about you, but I'm already a master procrastinator. I don't need to program it anymore into my life. So when I start to feel the resistance, I go, okay, this is a time I really need to stick it through. Does that help? Okay, great. So I'm going to start being quiet now and give you all an opportunity to try what we just did. So draw a few different lines, go over them again, not exactly the same, and we're not going to zigzag over them. Okay, so we're not doing an over-under. Try not to do an over-under. Try to resist doing an over-under. That will be the most natural thing that you feel like doing. You will feel like doing an over-under. Try to resist that. And then let's round together and then see if you have any questions about rounding different colors together. If you don't round two colors together and leave that intersection as a sharp intersection, what you are actually saying is that there is no connection between the two. That this is the relationship between them. They're not attached. Once you attach them, then you're going to round them. Good? Great. Enjoy your quiet time and your rounding, and if there are any questions, let me know. I do this a lot when I'm thinking about something and I'm trying to solve a problem. Oh, I will also tell you this. When I have multiple colors and one color is darker than the other ones, I usually use the lighter color to blend into the darker one. Because when I do it the opposite, if I try to, for example, use the purple to blend into the yellow, I overpower the yellow. And it looks disjointed. It looks like my line is not finished. And so what I will do instead is I will use the yellow to blend into the purple. Does that make sense? This is something that you have artistic license on. If you would like to do it the other way, by all means. This is just my personal preference. I find that it doesn't make it feel like it's disjointed. But if I do it the other way around, and if I use the darker color to blend into the lighter color, then my darker color ends up looking like it's just disjointed and it's not a complete line, and then it overpowers the lighter color. So I will use the lighter color to blend into the darker color, not the other way around. This is why I'm using this purple one, and I'm going to actually round all of the purple with itself, and I will use the green and the yellow to round into the purple, because the purple is the most dominant color I have right now. Okay? And it's easier sometimes to go one color at a time when we are rounding. So I like to draw all of my lines at first, but then I will spend one color at a time rounding so that I can tell where the flow is, and I don't create extra flow where I don't need to. Okay? Just a suggestion. None of this is written in stone. You can always do what makes you feel good about your artwork. At the end of the day, this is your personal expression, and it needs to feel good to you. That's the most important part of neurographic art. That you relate to it. That it feels good to you. Okay? paper is not the best today. I forgot that this is a sketch paper. It has too much teeth, so it's really fighting my marker every step of the way. And it's making my marker bleed a little. So if you're using markers, it's important that you use like mixed media paper or marker paper, and not a sketch paper, which is meant for pencils and charcoal and things of that nature. So, word to the wise, use your pick your paper well. So now that I've finished the purple, I'm actually rounding the green into the purple as well. Okay, so if I'm showing, I can bring this closer. I'm not only rounding the green with itself, but also with the purple, but I'm going to leave the yellow alone. When I go into the yellow, I will blend the yellow into the purple and into the green. Okay. So right now, the only thing I'm looking at is the green intersections with green and green intersections with purple. The yellow, I'm going to pretend like it's not there at all. See? When the green intersects, I bring the green into the purple. Okay? So I round this shape with itself first, and then I come in and blend it into the purple. paper is really fighting me today, but that's okay. My fingers are starting to cramp. Choosing the right tools for your work is really, really important. 2 down, 1 to go. How's everybody else doing? Are you trying this along with me? I love the way that the quality of the lines change as you do the rounding. You see how you can barely see the yellow that I haven't rounded? Give us another 20 minutes and you will see how much you will be able to see the yellow as well. The rounding creates strength and resilience, both in the quality of your lines and in your own mind and soul. I really love the peace that this process brings, even when sometimes it makes me frustrated when I'm not using the right tools, but doing this process by itself makes me feel very peaceful and in control, but not in a masculine, overt way. In a I will be okay even if I surrender kind of way. makes me feel like in life I don't need to be a salmon. Whatever the flow of life is, I can be one with it. And I can surrender to that without feeling out of control. This art has really, really helped me reconnect with my feminine. I have been very, very comfortable in my masculine. You know, I've been raised by a very masculine mom. And so I'm very comfortable in my own masculine. But this has really helped me soften and be more comfortable with my feminine, with my receptive side, with my sweet side, with my kindness. And also with this idea that anytime there's a problem, I don't necessarily have to be the one who solves it. I don't have to have all the answers. I can allow for the universe, I can allow for the people around me, I can allow for society to help me figure it out. Has helped me to realize that in my interactions, I'm looking for more commonalities and things we have in common rather than points of difference or points of contention. This art has really softened me. Practicing this art has really softened me as a person. Because I now have an outlet for my emotional discomfort. Number one, I don't bleed it onto other people. I bleed it onto paper and I make something pretty out of it. And it has also, because I have a healthy way of expressing my frustration, I now have a higher capacity to deal with other people with patience and understanding. Because my emotional cup is not constantly overflowing with pain that I'm trying to push down or pretend it's not there. That is one of the beautiful parts of this art for me. That it changes who I become. It changes who I am. Because it gives me higher capacity. It gives me the ability to express the kinds of things we usually hide. We usually try to not deal with. It gives me a healthy expression for my frustrations, so I don't have to take it on other people or other situations. I can express my anger, my resentment, my pain, all of that in a way that doesn't bleed or doesn't create ripples for other people in their lives. But at the same time, that expression, being able to express how I'm feeling without it affecting other people, creates a greater capacity within me to have tolerance in my relationships. Because my cup is not overflowing, because I'm not always triggered. Or when I am triggered, I don't respond or I don't react to the person that's triggering me in that moment. See, as you round, you find other areas that you forgot to round with the other colors. And that's okay, we can always go back. I think this is also why this art is helpful with physical pain or with chronic pain, because pain tolerance isn't just a physical issue. Pain also affects us emotionally and mentally. And being able to express the frustration we feel with pain creates a higher level of pain tolerance physically. when you can emotionally release, when you can express the frustration of not feeling well, it gives you more capacity to deal with other things. Expressing our emotions is so important, and we don't always have healthy ways of doing it that doesn't affect other people. You know, not all of us have access to a therapist or to a life coach or to a confidant who can listen without judging us. But this piece of paper is never going to judge you. These lines are never going to judge you. So you can put all of your frustration down onto this paper and really express how you feel without any fear of judgment or any repercussions. And what's beautiful is at the end, it shows you, you can visually see that something beautiful can come out of something that was very negative and very emotionally charged in the beginning. Have a great day, Claudia. You know, self-expression doesn't always have to be in words. It doesn't have to be in ways that other people can also recognize it. Just having the ability to express for yourself is good enough. You are telling your ego and your subconscious mind through this practice that it is important, it is good enough, that you're going to give it the time and the energy it needs to acknowledge its existence. We're not denying a portion of ourselves. We're not hiding a portion of ourselves. We are not assimilating it so that it is pleasing to other people. We're doing this just for ourselves. And in a world and in a situation where most of the time we're doing things to serve other people, especially as women, it is really, really important for us to have a self-love practice that revolves around ourselves and our own expressions and our own feelings and our own thoughts. So when I say learning this art saved my life, I am not joking. I used to be a highly functioning, highly anxious person. I have a long history. I was diagnosed with depression at the age of 13. I had my first panic attack at the age of 11. I had my first ECG at the age of 11. I scared the crap out of my babysitter because I had just unbearable chest pains. Later on in life, when I was in my early 20s, I was diagnosed as being bipolar depressed. I am not. I am just an empath, which is also a defense mechanism from early childhood trauma. I grew up in a very, very tumultuous household with parents who were more concerned with their own needs and their daily survival than meeting the needs of their child. Well, this child. My brother fared a little bit better than me, given that he was younger and he was a boy. So from a very young age, I learned to be hypervigilant about other people's feelings, about other people's emotions, because irregularity or dysregulation in their emotions literally meant harm for me. Physical and emotional harm. So I learned to always be very, very aware of other people's feelings. This is what we call being an empath. Being an empath is not a gift. We all have it as infants. It's just if you grow up in an unsafe environment as an infant, you never shut down those receptors or those abilities to perceive other people's emotions. This is what we naturally do as babies in between 0 and 18 months. This is when we're starting to recognize our sense of self, and we get that from the reaction we get from the people around us, specifically our parents, very much especially from our mom. Right? So when the mother is aware of the needs of the child, and when they greet you with smiles and they tell you that other people are safe, that you're safe with other people emotionally and physically. And when that doesn't happen, when there is neglect, when there is tension, when there is a lack of safety in that 0 to 18-month period, a lot of us leave those receptors having to do with other people's emotions open. And later on, you call these people empaths in life, because we literally feel other people's emotions, because we have trained our body that this is the way for us to be kept safe. Okay, so being an empath is actually a defense mechanism towards early childhood abuse. Or from early childhood trauma. It means that one or both of your parents or adults in your life at the early age were unstable emotionally, and you felt unsafe around them. So I grew up with a really, really high amount of anxiety. I was a very high functioning, anxious person. I have had panic attacks majority of my life. And it wasn't until I discovered this art and got good enough in it that I could do compositions on my own, and I could use this to express what I was feeling, that my anxiety stopped. My panic attacks stopped. My depression to a great extent stopped. Now this is my coping mechanism. When I feel under stress about something, when I feel unsafe, when I feel like I need to express how I'm feeling in the moment, I do one of two things. I do this, and then I will journal. The issue with journaling, which I love, my pen and my notebooks have been my best friends since I was a kid, because I couldn't talk to anyone else, so I would talk to myself in my diaries. But what happens when you write something down and when you use language is that your inner judge kicks in. There's a sense of what happens if someone else someday reads what I'm writing. And so we edit ourselves. And the other thing is we think faster than we write. So as you're writing things down, you can start judging yourself and looking back at what you're writing and say, hey, is this going to be socially acceptable? So we can edit ourselves. But when we do it graphically like this with lines, nobody else ever is going to know what your intention was or what your feelings were. So this is a little bit more liberating. This is a little bit more of an honest way of actually expressing our emotions and intentions and what we want. Which is why ever since I learned this method, I don't do regular vision boards. I only do neurographic ones. And if you would like to do one, there is a video about it for winter 2023 from a couple of weeks ago. So you can go back in through the videos and see how we do a neurographic vision board that has no words, and it has no pictures, no images. Nobody is going to know your intention other than you with that kind of a composition. This art form really, really saved my life. It gave me the strength to come out of the abusive relationship I was in. It gave me the ability to forgive myself for having put myself in that situation, for having chosen the partner that I did. It allowed me to process through my emotions as I was getting ready to become independent and have my own home, and for the first time live by myself. it gave me a healthy expression for the emotions I was feeling. That I was either too ashamed or too concerned to reveal to anyone else, out of a fear of judgment, that I would get judged for having done what I've done or having made the decisions I had made in my life. But with this art, I can express anything I'm feeling, from joy and elation and excitement to absolute despair. And there's no one that can judge me for it. In fact, when people look at my artwork in the end, they never see the pain. They never see the negative. The only thing they see is the positive. I was molested as a child, very early in my childhood. And that has, of course, formed a lot of my being and my personality as an adult. And of course, I sought therapy for it later on in life, in my early 20s. EMDR saved my life. It really allowed me to change my association with the events that had happened to me as a child. But healing is not a linear journey, and it is not a one and done kind of thing. Even though I had done many hours of therapy with a therapist and through EMDR about that, from time to time things still trigger me that have to do with what happened to me when I was 3 years old. And so I have done multiple compositions, some of them releases, some of them programming around my childhood sexual abuse. And anytime I show them to anybody, they would never guess that those pieces came out of so much pain and so much doubt and so much hurt. The only thing that they see is beauty in it. And that helped me a lot to change my association with this event in my past that made me feel like I was damaged, like I wasn't good enough, like I wasn't lovable, like this thing that happened to me that I had no control over as a child made me less than other people. It made me ugly, for lack of a better word. It made me damaged goods. And so seeing people react to my artwork with that kind of an intention behind it, and having them see nothing but the beauty of it, is very, very affirming. Because it made me feel like I'm not damaged. I'm not damaged goods. People can still see the beauty in me. People can still see the value in the person I am today, not the victim that I was as a child. The programming that I received, the messaging that I received when I was a child, when I told my mother what had happened, was to make me feel like this was my fault. Like I was responsible for what had happened to me in an age where I don't even have agency yet. And I carried that with me for the majority of my life, feeling like I needed to prove my worth to other people. I needed to prove that I was lovable, that I could be loved, that I was worth it. So I spent the next 35 years of my life performing for affection. I tried to meet other people's needs so that maybe one day they would meet my needs and they would love me for who I am and what I could offer them, because just being wasn't good enough. My being was damaged. And doing this art, having to do with something that heavy, has helped me realize that that's not the case. That when people look at me, they don't see my flaws. They don't see my past. I don't necessarily share this information with a lot of people when I meet them, that this is what has happened. But in my subconscious mind, there is this belief, right? This belief was programmed into the 5-year-old me. When I told my mom what had happened, her reaction was, how What kind of a child have I raised that you would allow for something like this to happen? I was 5. And yet I grew up with this idea that I am at fault. I am already damaged goods. And it took a long time for me to be able to get over that. And this art helped a lot. It allowed me to express a lot of the things that I couldn't even express in therapy, that were too painful, that were too shameful for me. But then when I started doing this art with those intentions and those feelings behind it, and I started to share them in public, the only thing I got was a positive reaction to how beautiful it was. Nobody could see the pain and the damage behind it, so it slowly started to reprogram my subconscious mind about what had happened to me. It allowed me to change my association with the events of the past. I cannot change what happened to me when I was a child. I cannot change what happened yesterday. But I can change my association with it. I can change the story that I tell myself about it. And for better or worse, we are social creatures. We are creatures that get our sense of identity and our sense of worth from our social interactions. This is why interactions between mothers and babies in those formative first years are so important. This is why having societal acceptance is part of our basic psychological needs. After fulfilling our basic needs of safety, shelter, and food, what we seek is acceptance through society, is having a station in society, having society take ownership of us, because we are social creatures. And so having people validate you and having this ability to change your association with the story allows you to show up differently in society, and therefore allows you to have a different experience of yourself as well. Nothing happens in isolation. We are not isolated creatures. We always, at the end of the day, need to be accepted. We need to feel like we belong somewhere. And what pain and trauma does is that it disassociates you. Those people who have been through trauma always feel like, I'm the only one this has happened to. Nobody else will understand if I tell them what my pain is. This is a very common misconception in trauma, that we feel like other people couldn't possibly understand. They haven't been through it. So pain and trauma in that way is very, very isolating. But once we start sharing, once we start talking about it, we start to recognize how common our pain is, how many more people have experienced the same thing. And that is very, very valuable. And it's very affirming for our self-esteem. I said all of this to say that the reason I'm in love with this art form isn't just that it's pretty. I have used this throughout this period of transition in my life. In fact, it was because I started doing this art that I had the ability to look back into my childhood, to do these inner child meditations where I could go back in time and I could hold the younger version of myself. I could see the younger version of myself in different situations. And I was able to give her love, and I was able to give her grace and understanding, something that I wasn't given in those situations. That's what healing is. That's what the process of healing from trauma entails. All of life, we all get traumatized in our life without exception. There's nobody who has not felt hurt or rejected at some point or another in their life. This is what teaches us. Pain is our greatest teacher, is the only teacher we have in life. This is why we remember bad things more than the good. Because what your brain is trying to do is recognize the patterns associated with those things that hurt us so that it can help us prevent it. This is why good memories don't last as long. Because your brain is not trying to prevent something good from happening to you again. Your brain is trying to recognize those patterns that bring you pain so that it can prevent it from happening again. This is why negative words and negative interactions have such lasting effects. Whereas good memories seem to fade into the background really, really quickly. Right? So we've all been traumatized. We've all been hurt at some point or another. We can either learn to express them, and when we are hurt, when we are put into a fight or flight situation, we lose our ability to logically deal with whatever's bringing up those emotions. Right? We can't use our logic. This is why we go into PTSD or complex PTSD, which is a relational issue. We don't feel safe in relationships. Complex PTSD comes from having dealt with abuse in a long-term situation. This is what happens to a lot of people who have been dealing with narcissists, right? So if you've had an abuser for a long time, this is what happens to you internally. You develop complex PTSD, you develop having issues with feeling safe in relationships. And so the journey of healing is never linear. It is never a one and done kind of thing. Different things are going to trigger you. And what happens when we are traumatized is a version of dismemberment. A piece of you, a version of you is frozen in time in that moment. And it's not until we can go back and literally remember that version of ourselves. And I don't mean remember as the opposite of forget, but remember as in the opposite of dismemberment. It's not until we reattach and reaffirm and rehold that version of ourselves that the trauma can then be dealt with. There is a version of us out there that was traumatized at the moment of trauma, existing outside of us, waiting and hoping for us to reclaim it. But in order for us to be able to do that, we have to be in a calm state of mind. We can't get re-triggered into the trauma, because the moment we do, we will disassociate again. This is why this art is helpful, because it allows me to go back into painful moments from my past, but stay present and stay calm. And so I have the ability to remember myself. This is why I'm obsessed with this art, and I would like to teach it to everyone on the face of this planet, because I think we can all benefit from a simple practice that allows you to connect to yourself and allows you to do what it takes for you to heal itself. At the end of the day, there is no doctor, whether Western medicine or Eastern medicine or psychology, doctor of the body or doctor of the mind, makes no difference. You are the one who heals yourself. Your subconscious mind, your conscious mind always knows exactly what it is that you need. Nobody knows it better than you. And we are all incredibly resilient. All we need is the ability to have access to that part of us that knows exactly what it is we need. And in order to do that, we need to find a way to find safety and calmness and presence in a moment of trauma. And for me, this art form is what gave me that. This is why I like teaching it to other people, because I know we are all carrying pain. And if we don't heal those pains, then those pains bleed into every aspect of what we do on a daily basis. They take over our life. Our story becomes the story of how we are the victim. And you cannot be the victim and the victor in your story at the same time. So by changing our association with the events in the past, we come out of victimhood and we can step into being the victor. We can take control. We can change the narrative about the past and therefore change our lived experience in the future. Anyway. 2 hours in, this is what it looks like when we do just lines and we combine colors together. If you've done this exercise with me, I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't done it, I suggest you go back to the beginning of the video, find yourself some colored markers, and give it a try. Again, if you come up with resistance, with this feeling of, oh, this is too much, this is going to take too long, this is too many intersections, whatever it may be, sit through it. You need that more when you have resistance, when your ego is trying to get you to get up. Because your ego isn't quite understanding what's happening, so it's trying to protect you. You do not need protection from this method. Just, you can do hard things. So sit through it and get through it. Okay? So thank you so much for joining me today. I will see you all again next week in time for the full moon in Leo, which is our ability to, the full moon is the time where we are being invited to let go of that which no longer serves, and Leo is all about self-confidence. So next week on Thursday, we're going to do a release together having to do with letting go of all of those things which stopped us from feeling self-confident. And so I wish you all a lovely, lovely weekend, and I will see you next Thursday for our full moon in Leo release. In the meantime, if you want more information, if you want to get started on this journey and you want to learn all of the basics of neurographic art properly, I suggest you visit my website, because the Intro to Neurographic Art is a self-paced class that is already live on my website. I'm going to have a couple more classes in terms of journeys, of programming journeys coming up soon that you can take on your own time, and you don't need to wait for me or be in class with me. But for now, the intro course is out there, so if you want more detailed information than what I'm sharing here on YouTube, feel free to check that out and get yourself started on that journey. I really suggest you finish the intro course first before moving on to any programming sessions in general, because it gives you the ability to really understand this art form and become comfortable with it before moving into doing the programming, and you're not so worried about, oh, am I doing the lines right, and all of that, when you're really trying to manifest that which you want into your life. Okay? So with all that said, happy weekend. Thank you for being here, and I will see you all next week. Have a good one, everybody. Thank you, Diana. Thank you so much. Have a lovely day, everybody. See you next week. Oh, also, if you want reminders of when these classes are happening, please go to my website and join the email list. I do email everybody every week, letting you know what's coming up and what's next and all of that. So if you're not part of the email list, please do go and join the email list so you can get news about what's coming up. Next week, like every week, Diana, Thursdays, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is when I come on live and we do these things together. So every week, Thursday, 5 o'clock. Going forward, I might change that. I might change from Thursdays to Saturdays instead. But for now, next week, Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you go to my live section on my YouTube, it's already scheduled, and you can just tell it to remind you when it's time. And you can also go to my website, maryamini.com, join the mailing list, and I will send you reminders so that we make sure you don't miss any of these sessions. Okay? Lovely. So with that, I leave you for the weekend, and we will see you again next week on Thursday. Have a lovely week, everybody. Ciao for now.